Ashlyn here for the Dogs Queensland video channel, speaking today to Craig Pettett. He's a Dogs Queensland Director and Chair of the PR, Media and Marketing Committee for Dogs Queensland. And we have some exciting news that we're going to leave till the end of the interview, but we're going to start off having a little chat about volunteers. Now, across Dogs Queensland, across the state, there are heaps of volunteers involved doing events for Dogs Queensland, not just for confirmation shows, but for all the agility, dog sports, dancing with dogs, all those sorts of things. And the volunteers are basically the only reason that these events can go forward. So, Craig, where do our volunteers come from?
Thanks, Ashlyn. Everywhere, basically. So, just to look at where all of our volunteers work within our organisation's largely built on volunteers. So if you look around the Durack grounds and everything that's here, that's because of our volunteers that we've had in the past, and some of those volunteers are still working today. In your regional clubs, none of the club shows, none of the tracking events, none of the agility events, none of the dog events that we're involved in would be happening without volunteers. In fact, you'd have no clubs without volunteers.
Absolutely.
You'd have a very busy office trying to organise shows and events all over the place, and I don't think they'd find it a fun job. And I guess that's the other thing, our volunteers come from all kinds of backgrounds, so they all bring some great expertise to Dogs Queensland. They've had many experiences in many different types of not only dog-related industries but other industries where they can lend their skills to what we're trying to do and trying to advance the cause of our purebred dogs in Queensland. So they work extremely hard. They give up their weekends. Most of them work full-time jobs. So then to come out on the weekends and also work as well all weekend.
It's a big job.
Fantastic. Yeah, they work very hard.
Now, you're from Central Queensland.
I am, yes.
We're doing this interview right now in Brisbane. How many of our volunteers are travelling and how far are they going?
We have a lot of travelling volunteers. I certainly know in the regional areas. So I'm from Rockhampton, so we may travel. I've travelled up to Townsville, Cairns, so you're looking at maybe 11 hours, and gone and worked and volunteered at shows.
Do you take the dogs with you?
I do, yes. My furthest trip was to the Cairns Ag Weekend, which was fantastic. I've gone up a couple of times.
Yep.
Did a bit of stewarding while I was there, but it's not even the official positions that you see. There's a lot of voluntary positions that go on behind the scenes in terms of organising the shows. So all the schedules and the organisation of judges and things like that doesn't just happen. There's not a fairy or a group of fairies that do it all. It's all people working behind the scenes, and it's even down to the tiny jobs about preparing a roll of ribbons to hand to the steward to give out, and prizes and things like that.
Well, obviously we see the work that volunteers have done on our show days. So we see the stewards and we see our show manager running around and the person on the speaker if there's a speaker. But what happens outside of the show days? How much work is there for the volunteers?
There's an awful lot. So I guess when you're looking at planning your shows, most committees, particularly in the regional areas, and I know some of the clubs in the metropolitan area as well, they work on very small numbers. So they've only got a few people who need to organise venues, they need to organise judges, and a lot of the people who are on show committees will appreciate how difficult and how many phone calls and emails you need to make to organise judges and bring them in. And it's also organising your prizes. So you've got your volunteers going out and pleading with Harvey Norman or the Good Guys or something like that. Can you give us a really great discount on these prizes, please? Just so that they can provide them for the members. So a lot of people really probably, unless they've worked in a club and been involved in that, don't have any idea how much work goes into it.
I must admit, from my time in Rockhampton, when I lived there, I think I won about 4 kettles.
Yes.
With the one Doberman, and over a few weekends we all got a kettle. So they're all in the cupboard. I think we've just used the last one.
It's a very popular prize, along with toasters and rice cookers. So.
Great stuff. Now, for our volunteers, you yourself have been volunteering for a long time. You do a lot of work. What are our volunteers getting out of it? What sort of benefits do you get from volunteering?
Well, we don't do it for the money because there's not a real lot in it. Maybe only about 100th hour a year or something like that. But no.
Are we trying to entice new volunteers?
We are. We're always trying to get new volunteers on board.
May or may not have money.
Yeah, that's right. I guess the thing that we get out of it by volunteering is just helping out our fellow exhibitors and our fellow participants in the sports, so that they can enjoy the hobby that they want to be a part of. A lot of our volunteers do it because they want to give something back to the dog world as well. So in many ways, a lot of us have got stuff out of the dog world. So whether that just be nice dogs, we've got high awards, we've won a few best in shows, and it's been really good. Some of the volunteers will try and give something back to the dog world. Some of our volunteers will do it because they're the only ones there to do it. Yep. So a lot of people in clubs will probably appreciate the scenario where maybe the people who've been doing it for years and years are moving away, or they no longer want to do it and they're starting to pull out.
Yep.
And somebody steps in to pick up the slack, and that's how they've done it, and they think, oh yeah, I can get in and learn how to do this, and we can make sure that it keeps happening. But those same people a lot of the time are there 10, 12, 15 years later, still doing the job because it's enjoyable.
That's wonderful.
It actually is enjoyable. There's good and bad times with it, and there's certainly a lot of testing times with it, but on the whole, it's really enjoyable. It's basically a big social occasion with the other exhibitors, so it may not feel like that at the end of a show weekend. I think every volunteer on every committee at the end of an event can think of nothing more except thank God that's over. But while you're doing it, you're busy and you do actually enjoy it. So.
What do you think your biggest disaster has been ever?
Disaster?
Have you had a disaster?
Well,
the stories where somebody's Shar Pei has jumped off the table and eaten a miniature poodle or something?
No, well, I
don't think that's actually happened, but that hasn't happened. But
no, I haven't had that one before. I guess not really disasters, but one of the things that we really have to cope with, and I know everyone at Durack appreciates it as well as the regional areas, is the weather and the challenges that it poses for you. So hot, your rain events, so we've had a few cyclones up in our northern areas and things like that. I can remember one show that we actually had at Rocky, our club, and by the second day of the show we were down to about 30 people who turned up in the teeming pouring rain. I was stewarding, so I had like a soaked steward sheets, and basically my records were like me cutting the figures through the paper.
It's funny you mentioned, I actually remember that weekend because I was in Rockhampton doing the emergency broadcast for the flooding.
Well, you would remember
at the radio station that weekend. That's it. Didn't have my bish on there.
No, that wouldn't have been a good look. But it is one of the challenges because we've got the weather to contend with. The rain's pretty bad. The heat can be a bit of a challenge as well at times, but you can sometimes work around that. But I guess the thing is, when those kinds of things are happening, it's just one of the little stresses that are added to the volunteer's role. And I guess it's one of the things that you look back at it and think, oh God, how did we do that and how did we get through it? And I guess it comes back to, again, the satisfaction that you get out of doing the job. You've had a few challenges thrown at you and you've been able to face them, and a lot of the exhibitors are really good. They come and say, I don't know how you guys managed to do this, but we really appreciate that you did.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, on top of being a wonderful volunteer that donates so much of your time, you're also a Dogs Queensland Director. So as your role as an official person for Dogs Queensland, how would you like to see moving forward our volunteers be recognised?
I guess in terms of recognising them, it's something that happens at a really organic level within the clubs as well. So a lot of the clubs will support their volunteers and thank them, even if it's running up and shoving a drink in their hand, or sometimes if you've got travelling people who would steward for you or something like that, you might subsidise their camping or something like that for the day that they're working. But I guess there's not really been so far any formal channels in terms of how we recognise our volunteers and their contribution, and this is, I guess, where Dogs Queensland has stepped in. We're actually rolling out a program, which is the Volunteer of the Year program, where we would like to formally recognise some of our volunteers who are going above and beyond the call of duty.
How wonderful.
Through a formal program.
That's great. So we won't go too far into it because there will be an official announcement that you'll be able to read. Will there be an email that go out to everybody?
There will be. Members, we hope, will keep an eye on their dog blog that comes out.
Perfect.
Or the D News, as it's now called. Used to be the dog blog. Emails will come out. We should have some postings on website and Facebook as well. Just giving everyone some information about what the Dog of the Year program is, how it works.
Volunteer of the Year.
Volunteer of the Year. So who's eligible for it, who's not eligible for it. So and how the whole process works. But the basic essence of it is to really put some kind of formal program in place where we thank all of our volunteers, but we recognise those who've really gone above and beyond the call of duty.
That's fantastic. So, Craig, to finish us off, if you want to get involved and start helping out your local clubs or at Dogs Queensland or at the Duret grounds or at the grounds in your local area, who do you get in contact with and what do you say?
Yep. Well, basically you can look at your local clubs. So on the website or in the Dog World magazine, there's a listing of your local clubs. So if you do contact any of the secretaries in your area, if you are interested in helping out, and just bear in mind that most club secretaries are happy for whatever help people can provide. So a lot of people will maybe say, look, I haven't got a lot of time, I don't know how to steward, I don't know how to ride, I can't do that kind of thing. It doesn't matter how big the contribution is, nobody really cares about that. Even if it's something like helping to pull down a gazebo or something like that, it is massively appreciated by the clubs. And some of the ways that you may look at doing it, like I said, being a show worker, so you can actually do some training if you want to, and you can get onto Dogs Queensland about the training that's available to be a show worker.
There is access to training outside of Brisbane, isn't there?
There is, yes. Yeah, we do have some regional trainers. It can be a little bit of a challenge in that they're based in certain locations, so they'll need to travel to different locations, and you need to have a certain number of registrations, I guess, to make it a viable thing. But we do try and coordinate it with shows and stuff like that, so we can get someone in the area. But there's definitely lots of ways, from the smallest, tiniest contribution to as much as you like. If you want to work full-time for a club, I'm sure they'll be happy to take you on.
They'll find things for you to do. Wonderful.
So,
Craig, one of the directors of Dogs Queensland and of course the chair of the PR, Media and Marketing Committee, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful time in Brisbane.
Thank you, Ashley.